This video is going to deal with goggles. I have a set of Fat Sharks, which I really like because they have the fan to eliminate the fogging, and that really does work. I was actually really surprised that it worked as good as it does, but it does work. So that's a nice little feature. However, I also like my Sky Zones, and these I like because of the aspect ratio. It's sort of like looking at a movie theater screen. And so what I did was I adapted a faceplate for a Fat Shark to my Sky Zones. Now, I did this in such a way that I did not use any adhesive, use any glues, use any tape to attach the faceplate. And you can see the faceplate's actually attached really well. And one thing about the goggles, I've read online where guys are talking about the space or the gaps, and they can see daylight. And you know, I can see daylight. I can see a lot of daylight with these goggles, but I've got to look for it. In other words, if I'm looking at the screen, then yeah, there may be some light coming in, but you know what? It's not a bother. The other thing is that light coming in is actually because there's a gap, and I use that gap to my advantage. In other words, with the Sky Zones here, for example, I have the camera in the front, so I can push the button and now I can see out the camera. But I find it actually more convenient just to look through that hole that light's coming through and turn my head in such a way that I can see what it is that I'm looking for, whether it be to pick my radio up off the table or to look and see if there's anyone around my model before I get ready to take off, just as a safety precaution. So, you know, these little holes that people are complaining about, maybe if they looked at it in a different way, they might not find those holes irritating. So, as an FYI, if you have a gap, use it to your advantage. And again, I could very easily add some tape or some shoe goo or something to cover up the gaps, but I have no desire to do that because I'll use the gaps. Okay, so let me talk about how I did the faceplate. Now, the first thing you're going to notice with the Sky Zones is they weren't designed for a faceplate, meaning that the switch that controls, the hat switch that controls the contrast and the brightness is in the middle of the goggles. As we're on the Fat Sharks, it's off to the side. Well, what I did was I took my Dremel and used a bit to grind away very slight amount of the bottom of that so that it cleared the hat switch. There's still some white plastic where the fan is, and this way the fan continues to work like it was designed. But I did take my Dremel and eat out part of this so that the top part of the hat switch here is not interrupted by this section of faceplate. And then I cut me a teardrop shape from a credit card, or in this case a debit card, with a hole in it, and the hole rests over the hat switch, and now I can adjust the hat switch by moving this debit card around. If I'm done adjusting, I just simply push it out of the way, and see, it stays out of the way. It's not going to fall down. But if I need to adjust it, I just pull it out and simply hold on to it and make my adjustment. So that's how I did the adjustment part for the hidden switch, because it does get stuck under the fan. The other thing that I've done, and I did this on both my goggles, on this pair, which is my Sky Zones, you can see that my headband here is getting a little rough, and it's because I was actually taking the battery. Even with the stock battery, you know, it has some dimples in it to help hold it in place, but worst thing you can do is be flying and have your battery fall out of your goggles. So what some guys do is use zip ties, some guys will use some tape, and I was using tape until I came up with this. Now this is just some marker tape or safety tape, and this is pretty heavy. I've also used Dacron tape. You could even use packing tape, but what you want to do is put your battery in place, and then I'm going to do it with a piece of masking tape here. So we take off a piece of masking tape, and we actually put the tape on backwards, so the sticky side is up. But what I'm going to do is tape this on, and just tape it around itself until I hit the other side there. Okay, and so now I have it taping onto the back of itself. And then I'm going to take two pieces of tape like this, and I'm going to make a handle, if you will. And I'm just going to pull it back onto itself like that and leave just a little section that's sticking. And I'm going to put that, say, here. And then I'm going to do the same thing on this one. And we're going to do that like that. See, I have just a little bit of sticky on that side, so I'm going to put that like this. So now I have those two out. Now again, this is the sticky part out. So I'm going to pull this around, and now I'm going to go back the other way and cover up the sticky part. So I'm going to do this, and hopefully I've given myself enough tape to get all the way around back where I started, which would be, see, that's not quite long enough, because actually I want to go, let's do this. We'll start again. And I'm just going to cut this off. So let's try it again. So I'm going to put it on backwards. Okay, actually, why don't we roll this back around here? You'll see what these tabs are here in a moment. So now I have those tabs. So I'm not going to redo those, but I am going to redo the rest of this. So I'm not going to cut this out either, because you may make the same mistake. So let's go ahead and put this down, roll it around back onto itself, stick it there, and I'll change direction and come back. So let's go back the other way. Now I'm covering up the sticky part of the tape, and I want to get to where I started, which if we pull this back around here, and we pull this out a little bit, you can see there that if I go around like this and then around like that and put this here, now I have a piece that I can slide, or I could just let that wrap, and then I could use these two pieces. So to slide it on would be like that. To slide it off, I would just grab this and slide it off like that, so I could take my battery out. And then this, I could use this to slide, or you could use the option where you have this tab, and then you could take the tab and slide it. So if you use this tab, then you wouldn't have these, and if you use these, then you don't have to do this. But the idea is short and sweet. We just stick the battery in, slide this over, and I like the other tabs better, because now I can grab the front of this and hold this and slide that on, and you're just going to slide that to the middle, and you're done. Now this would be on the outside, so it's never a bother to your head. But that's how you make that. And now I'm just going to tear this off, because I have the same thing in this. But like I say, this is a little heavier tape, but you can see I can do the same thing. So, and it doesn't really matter how wide it is, but 2 inches wide is perfect. 1 inch wide works. But now there's no chance, no risk of my battery falling out of here. So that's how I did the battery part. And again, I did the same thing on my Fat Sharks, and here I used Dacron tape, and see I have the two ears here, so I can pull it on and I can pull it off. Now, as far as my faceplate for these Sky Zones, I'm going to show you the detail here, and that's on the inside. You see I have a piece of wire, and see I can pull that piece of wire, but you hear it slamming back. That's because there's tension on it pulling it inside. What that tension is doing is it's keeping the wire up against the frame. There's no glue, there's no secret, there's just the way that I bent that wire. And the same thing on the other side. You can see that that wire is being slammed back up against, and it's just because of the tension. Now, in order for me to remove my faceplate, all I have to do is remove this wire. And what I did to remove the wire is just simply pull it out and push the two pieces together, and that's the wire. And now I do the same thing on the other side, so I pull this out, pull the two together, and that's the wire on that side. So I have the two wires, and now my faceplate simply lifts off. And what I did in order to do that, to utilize these wires, is first I bent the wire. Notice I have a 90-degree bend here with about a 3/8 leg on both sides. And then what I did to my faceplate was actually drilled a hole. So before I put the foam on, I drilled a hole right flush with the edge of this. So you can see there where the holes are. And so this wire actually rests in those holes. So when I put this together, the wires actually rest like that. Okay, and then the tension pulls them back onto themselves. So like that and like this. So now the wires get held in place. Again, no glue. And as far as where did I put those holes? Well, in my Sky Zone goggles, there's a couple of gaps. And if we look, I'm trying to find a pointer there, you can see the gap here. And you have the same thing on this side. So what I did was I actually laid my faceplate in place. Okay. And then I looked at where the edges of those gaps were, and that's where I put the hole. So I didn't put the hole back in the middle. I put the hole right on the edge of the existing hole and drilled a hole in the faceplate. So now whenever I put on the wire, I'm just going to slip the wire in there and have it hit the hole that's in the faceplate, and then hit it on the other side. And see, I could pull that piece of wire, but you hear it slamming back. That's because there's tension on it pulling it inside. So that's how I went about modifying the Fat Shark faceplate to fit my Sky Zone goggles. And then also the strap that holds the battery in place. So that's the modifications that I've done to my goggles. Now, as far as the wire, I'm using some really thin wire. And the key is to bend it and then shape the wire so that whenever you put it in place, it's going to spring back. And notice the bends that I have. I have it bent not straight up, but actually off to the, in this case, to the right a little bit. And this one here on this side, this one would be bent off to the left a little bit. And then obviously if you turn this over, it goes the other way. But whenever you install these, depending on which way you mount the wire, it's either going to pull it up or push it out. And if it's pushing it the wrong way, you just simply remove it and flip it over and install it back, and you will get the spring so that it springs inward, and which that keeps it away from your eye. So I hope this has been helpful to you, especially if you're flying in the summertime and you find that your goggles are fogging up quite a bit, and you like the aspect ratio of the Sky Zones over any of the others. But the Sky Zone, I don't know of anyone that has a aftermarket faceplate for a Sky Zone. So that's how I went about adapting a Fat Shark faceplate to the Sky Zone. And because of this color, the white and black, it actually looks pretty good. So I'm quite happy with it. And it took a little bit of time to get the wire bent right, but once you get it bent right, it is definitely worth the time and the effort it took to do it. Thanks for your time, and enjoy the hobby.